Hello and welcome to Jigsaw Shed. So in this project I took a piece of beech that was cut down in around 2018 to turn a bowl from. Now this piece of beech was from a batch, from one of the very first batches that I ever decided to season myself, and I did get it horribly wrong. So with most of these pieces I'd left the pith in and it had split. This one wasn't without its cracks, and I had used a emulsion paint. I think someone had suggested I could use that, but it wasn't that effective. I've definitely found that using wax recently has been a lot more effective. But yeah, this was the first time I was seasoning things and I did get it horribly wrong, but didn't get rid of the wood despite cracks and everything, and decided that I will still make a feature out of the cracks in it. So once I had it glued up and into rough shape, I decided to put the tenon in, and then from there work on the overall shape of the bowl that I eventually want to create. Now I knew I wanted to go for something like a little pedestal bowl, but as I was doing the cuts, it was still, the design of the shape was still forming in my head, and I was sort of liking the idea of what was happening as the tool was cutting the wood. So the cracks were smaller than one of the other pieces of the same beech that I've got, but still I needed to stabilize them, and decided to make them a bit of a feature using the O3A black CA glue. However, you will see shortly that I did cut it away a bit more, but it did leave a very subtle effect in there, which I liked. So I started power sanding it, but then realized I need to do hand sanding instead, just because of the shape of the foot. I couldn't get in there properly with the drill, but with the hand obviously could feed the sanding paper in nicely into the edges. Well, yes, sorry about that. This project was not without its technical difficulties. I did not realize that the phone battery had died. Although I had it plugged in, I forgot to switch it on. So the only bit you really missed was me putting cellular sanding sealer onto the piece, and then it came back with me denibbing it with the Chestnut Products Nye Whip pads, and obviously moving on to Yorkshire grit and then microcrystalline wax. So then it was just on to tidying up the tenon so that I can flip the piece over and work on the other side. Now the first bit I did was to add some texture using the Dremel 542 shaping cutting wheel. Now it was a very fine texture that I'm adding. The lathe was spinning probably around about 200 RPM, and I had the little disc spinning quite fast as on one of the higher speeds on the A260. And it was adding a fine texture, but it was just playing around with the angles to find the texture that I liked. And you will now see as I apply the stain just what texture I did get. Now I think if you use like a texturing tool like the Simon Hope or the Robert Sorby, you might get a deeper texture in there as well. But it was fun to play around with the Dremel and work out what I can achieve with it. Now, having done the texture with the Dremel, it was quite fine and did start sanding away too quickly, so I had to leave it a lot darker on the edge than I intended to, but you'll see what happens next. Now, I really enjoyed using the Crimson Guitar Vibrant Stunning Stains here. I had previously purchased 2 at Maker Central and then got some more at Christmas, so I had recently made a pen for my wife using this sort of colouring technique, and I really liked that, so I decided I will put it onto a bowl as well. Now with the sealing the stains in with using the aerosol spray, I realised afterwards I should have blocked off the lathe because I did seal in some dust on it, so that's going to take some cleaning up to do. I think there's some dust stuck to the shadow foam sticker now as well. So at this point in hollowing, when I stopped the lathe, I discovered this void that was about 1 centimeter deep going into the wall of the bowl. Now from the outside you couldn't see that there was a void, just there's a slight defect, but yeah, didn't give the impression that it was going to look like that inside. So it did take a lot of filling, so it was back to using O3 adhesives, initially just using the thin CA to seal in all the finer cracks as well. And then I did put some of it into the void just to seal the edges before putting the black O3 adhesives in there. Now I did use the accelerator as I was sort of short on time and wanted to move this project along, so I then could see also where the glue didn't fully take or fill the gaps, so I just filled those up before leaving that to set and then coming back to complete the turn. Now I did take more away than I intended to again in here, so there was a few more times where I just had to come back with the glue and top it up to reseal it, but yeah, you get the idea. So after finishing the hollowing, I stopped it there and went to bed that night, but it did haunt my dreams. I wasn't happy with the room, so it was too dark and the texture didn't show through enough, so I came back with the SE544 speed click wood cutting disc and did this a few times with staining and using the Dremel to create the texture and the effect I was going for. So at this point I was actually liking the effect I was getting and should actually have just left it here, but I continued to add more stain again. but maybe next time I will do this process and then leave it at that sort of rough, sort of worn effect it almost looked like. Now, as the seal was sealed in with the aerosol sanding sealer, I wasn't worried about applying sealer by hand, as there was no more running or movement of the stain. So I did go back to sanding it again, as I felt that the sealer just helped fill in the cracks more and just sealing any tear out, so I could clean it all out and make the finish a lot better inside. So then it was just using the chestnut knife web to denip the bowl after the sealer, and then I decided to move on to using melamine lacquer, mainly to do the outside, but then I decided actually I'm gonna put it on the inside of the bowl as well, which gave it a really obviously a really nice gloss effect inside compared to the outside. Now I know a lot of times this would feel a bit more plasticky inside, but I think it just offset really nicely against the coloured edge. So I did give the piece 3 coats of melamine lacquer, and in between each coat I used 400 grit sanding paper and then the Chestnut Products Nightwear pads. So then it was on to using Yorkshire grit. Now I used the original first, and then as it's a lacquered surface, I did move on to microfine just to enhance the shine of the piece. And then it was just moving on to microcrystalline wax for that final finish and protection of the bowl. So now that that was done, I had to move on to removing the tenon. I did this by using the tailstock to jam the bowl up against a previously turned block of wood with a piece of anti-slip matting in. Now I turned away as much as I could of it, and then took the nib off with a chisel and then sanded it to 400 grit. Now I left it unfinished so that I can put my logo on with the laser engraver later. Well, thank you for joining me in Jigsaw Shed. It's great to be back in the workshop again. I've had such a standstill period over the Christmas and New Year period. Just seem to have been so busy and not had any time to get out here. So thank you for joining me on my first project. There it is, first project of 2024. Really enjoyed doing this, playing around with the Dremel. It's given a fairly subtle effect on the edge, which I quite like. It's just, there's a tactileness to it as well. It could have been a bit lighter with the color, but I do like how the lacquer also offsets the rim itself with the shininess there. Obviously just got to add my logo to the bottom there still, and then it will be done. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. If you did, leave me a comment down below, give the video a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to my channel if you've not done so yet. Anyway, I will see you next time, because I'm gonna head inside now. It's 0.3 degrees centigrade in here, so I'm not gonna be playing around in the shed now. Anyway, take care.